started, first I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Emily Shaw. I am the Education and Volunteer Coordinator here at Inland Seas. Tonight's presentation is from Ross Richardson. Ross Richardson is a local. He's from Lake Ann, but he's spent about the last 10 years extensively researching and diving on shipwrecks in the Manitou Passage. So tonight's presentation is going to be kind of a culmination of the work he's done in that area. Real quick, did you want to say something? Okay, this is Tom Kelly. He's our Executive Director, and I think he has stuff right here.
Yes. Good evening. Welcome to Inland Seas. My name is Tom Kelly. I'm the director here. How many people are in the building for the first time tonight, ever? Good. Always like to see a few hands go up. You know, we've got some new people coming in the door. So thanks for coming. We do this once a month. There's a seminar on some Great Lakes topic. And there's a sheet here which you can take home with you here. It's also on our website at schoolship.org. The next one is July 17th, which is a 1,000-mile walk on the Great Lakes by Lorene Hoyce. Is that right? Close enough? Close enough. This woman has a particular urge to walk on the beach, and like many of us do, but she doesn't stop. So she was here a couple years ago to talk about her, I was going to say circumnavigation around Lake Michigan, but it wasn't in a boat, it was on foot. And that was pretty interesting. And now she's done another 1,000 miles on the beach, and so she's going to come and talk about that. And then on August 27th, we have a program on the piping plovers at Sleeping Bear Dunes with Alice Van Zoren. Many of you may know her. So those are the next two, and then we'll have programs going on all winter, so on those dark, dreary nights you can come out and learn some more about the Great Lakes here. So at the end of the program, if you'd like to come down to the boat shop with me, I'll give you a quick tour of the boat shop and show you our motor whaleboat that we're restoring, working on down there. We hope to have that launched maybe within about a week, and we'll be doing programs for the public on the whaleboat this summer later on too. So that's going to be a new addition to our curriculum. So I'll turn it back over to you, and you can introduce the speaker.
So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Ross Richardson.
All right, thanks. At the northern end of Lake Michigan lies the Manitou Passage, one of the deadliest stretches of water in the Great Lakes. In the heart of the Manitou Passage is Sleeping Bear Point, lying in wait, ready to snag any vessel who dares venture between her and the islands just offshore. A graveyard of shipwrecks lies between the Sleeping Bear Point's treacherous waters, and these are the stories of those wrecks, the shipwrecks of Sleeping Bear Point. My name is Ross Richardson, as you heard from Emily. In the past, I've had the privilege of working with Clive Cussler in his NUMA team and looking for this aircraft right here, Flight 2501, which is a Northwest Airlines DC-4, which disappeared with 58 people off of South Haven, Michigan. I went out with a crew about a month ago trying to find this aircraft. They've looked for about 10 years now and covered over 300 square miles of lake bottom and can't find it, any trace of the aircraft or the 58 people aboard. I've also had the privilege of working with shipwreck hunters Dave Trotter and Paul Ehorn. I'm probably best known for discovering the shipwreck of the Westmoreland. Westmoreland is a great Leelanau and Benzie County story. It's a treasure ship. It's supposed to have $10,000 in gold coins aboard it, along with 280 barrels of whiskey in its hold. I haven't found the whiskey. I drive a Saturn with 190,000 miles, so I haven't found the gold. I'm from Lake Ann, not too far from here, about half hour, 40 minutes from here. I volunteer at the Elmira Township Library once a week. A lot of this information you'll see in the presentation I researched while volunteering at the library and going through the local history section. These wrecks were found on my boat. It's a small boat, 20-foot bayliner. I'm also a diver for the Benzie County Sheriff's Department, a volunteer diver, and a special deputy with the Sheriff's Department. Lake Michigan's name is believed to originate from the Ojibwe term Michigami, which means large body of water. Lake Michigan is 321 miles long at its longest point and 118 miles wide at its widest point. Lake Michigan's maximum depth is 924 feet at a point about 25 miles west and slightly south of Frankfort, Michigan. And Lake Michigan has an average depth of 279 feet. At the northern end of Lake Michigan lies the Manitou Passage. The Manitou Passage stretches from Cathead Point on the tip of the Leelanau Peninsula to the Point Betsy Light and encompasses North and South Manitou Islands. The Manitou Passage is the most direct route to and from Chicago and Milwaukee from Lake Huron and the rest of the Great Lakes. Chicago and Milwaukee are the two largest cities on Lake Michigan and were key shipping ports during America's expansion to the west in the 1800s. From the mid-1800s until the turn of the century, North and South Manitou Island, Port Oneida, and Glen Haven became important refueling stops for early steamers, which would burn cordwood. Some of these steamers could burn 1 or 2 cords of wood an hour under normal operating circumstances. During the heyday of Michigan lumbering, this was a booming shipping area. This was also an area where ships have sought safety by attempting to ride out the storms in the lee of the island, some not too successfully, like this schooner ashore at North Manitou Island. All different types of vessels were lost in the Manitou Passage, from schooners, like we just saw, to wooden passenger steamers, such as the Rising Sun off Pyramid Point, along with wooden steel freighters also, like the Francisco Morazan, a modern freighter which lost her life here in 1960. She's wrecked on the south side of South Manitou Island. Here's some pictures of her recently. She's the best preserved above water shipwreck in the Great Lakes. Though time is taking her toll, we can see the bow section is gone and the stern is starting to collapse. Notice all this white stuff here. If you've been out to that wreck, you know what that is?
Guano.
Guano, bird crap. My son calls this the stinky wreck. You can be a quarter mile away, and when the wind blows and hits you just right, it'll knock you off your feet. So we like to go around and look at it, but we don't get on it or too close to it.
Oh, that's funny.
While the Morazan wrecked, it actually ran over another shipwreck. This old wood steamer that wrecked in around 1906. It actually flattened it out as it went in. And a lot of this wreck, even though most of it has been salvaged, is still there. And here's a little video of how close it is. There's a Morazan. We're about 150 yards away. And right under the water is a shipwreck. So there's lots of shipwrecks in the Manitou Passage for snorkeling and scuba diving. That visibility there is probably 60 foot that day. The Manitou Passage is home to the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Park, which encompasses a 35-mile stretch of Lake Michigan shoreline north and south Manitou Islands. Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore was authorized by Congress on October 21st, 1970, and in the summer of 2011, the Sleeping Bear Dunes Lakeshore was voted the most beautiful place in America by the viewers of Good Morning America. The most notable feature of the national park is Sleeping Bear Dune, which towers over 450 feet above the Lake Michigan shoreline. Native Americans passed down the following story of the legend of the sleeping bear around their campfires for generations. Long ago, along the Wisconsin shoreline, a mother bear and her 2 cubs were driven into Lake Michigan by a raging forest fire. The bears swam for many hours, but eventually the cubs tired and lagged behind. Mother bear reached the shore and climbed to the top of a high bluff to watch and wait for her cubs. Too tired to continue, the cubs drowned within sight of shore. The Great Spirit Manitou created 2 islands to mark the spot where the cubs disappeared and created a solitary dune to represent the faithful mother bear. Just north of Sleeping Bear Dune is Sleeping Bear Point, the most treacherous spot in the Manitou Passage. Its dangerous and shifting shoals, unpredictable seas, and remote locale have proved fatal to a host of ships. Because Sleeping Bear Point was so dangerous for shipping, the U.S. Life Saving Service in 1877 decided to place a station there. But it was not until 1901 that the money was appropriated and bids came in for the construction of the dwelling, boathouse, and outbuilding. Over the years, drifting sand began to bury the buildings, and the pounding surf made launching the boats difficult. In 1915, the U.S. Life Saving Service was combined with another agency to form the current U.S. Coast Guard. In 1931, the station was moved by horses, rollers, track, and cable from its location where that arrow is pointing to its current location. And in 1983, the station was restored to its 1931 appearance and turned into a maritime museum. The small schooner Free Trader is the earliest known recorded shipwreck of the Sleeping Bear. Built in St. Ignace in 1829, the Free Trader measured 41 feet in length and had a beam of 13 feet. She wrecked in a November gale in 1835, 2 years before Michigan became a state. In 1936, a popular English writer wrote this story about passing a shipwreck at the base of Sleeping Bear Dune. She wrote, "Just here, Mr. D pointed out a schooner of his, which was wrecked in a snowstorm the preceding November. She looked pretty and forlorn lying on her side in that desolate place, seeming a mere plaything thrown in among the cliffs. Ah," said the owner with a sigh, "she was a lovely creature and as stiff as a church. 2 lives were lost. 2 young Germans, stout lads, could not comprehend the orders given to them to put on all their clothing and keep themselves warm. They only half dressed themselves and the cold took them and they died. The rest tried to make a fire by friction of wood, but got only smoke. Someone found traces of a dog in the snow. These were followed for 3 miles and ended at an Indian lodge where the sailors were warmed and kindly treated." Another early wreck is that of the Gold Hunter. The Gold Hunter has a dubious distinction of having one of the shortest lifespans of any Great Lakes sailing vessels. A newspaper article from September 25, 1852 states, "The Gold Hunter arrived Buffalo, New York from Racine, Wisconsin on maiden trip with a cargo of 11,500 bushels of oats and 100 barrels of whiskey." Less than 2 months later, a Buffalo Daily Republic article dated November 10, 1852 stated, "Gale further reports, the new schooner Gold Hunter of Milwaukee is ashore at Sleeping Bear Lodge with chinaware and barreled freight." Charles Slifeld mentioned the wreck of the Gold Hunter in his biography, which he wrote in 1912. Members of the Slifeld family had tied up to the wreck about 5.5 miles north of the town of Empire after being blown off course in their Mackinac boat while making a trip from the mainland to South Manitou Island. Wrecks are still happening in the Manitou Passage. In August of 2010, the sailboat was cast high and dry at Sleeping Bear Point. In the summer of 2011, the tour boat Pictured Rocks was hit by a rogue wave and cast ashore near Sleeping Bear Dune. The windshield was caved in by this wave. Some of the crew members were injured seriously enough that they had to be rescued by helicopter. And this is a picture from the helicopter here, rescuing the crew members. Up until recently, there were 3 documented shipwreck sites at Sleeping Bear Point. 2 of the sites are actually up on shore. What we call Wreck Site A has been known about for decades. This picture was taken by local photographer Mark Lindsay, did a great job. Here it is during the summer. It consists of a heavy built hull and lies in the surf line of the beach. This picture was taken around 1913 that shows a wreck coming out of a sand dune that is very similar. Maritime historians at the time thought it was the wreck of the Caledonia. Here's a little video. To me, the most interesting part of this video is this is Super Bowl Sunday last year. Remember, it was really warm and it was crazy. We were hiking out there, and where's all the snow? But we can see it now, it's in the water, so this moves around, it covers and uncovers with sand, and as far as we know, has been there for 100 years. The schooner Caledonia, which that wreckage is thought to be from, is a 66-foot schooner and predecessor of the Christmas tree ship Ross Simmons. In an article from the Milwaukee Sentinel dated November 3, 1901, it states the schooner Caledonia, recently stripped and placed in a boneyard to rot, has been purchased by Kenosha parties, pumped out, fitted up, and sailed today. It is supposed that the old boat was too far gone to be safe, but the Kenosha people thought not, and will stop at northern ports, buy Christmas trees, and take them to Chicago. Just a few weeks later, the Duluth News Tribune article, dated November 28, 1901, stated, the crew and 3 men of the schooner Caledonia, which went down off Glen Haven, Michigan Monday morning, arrived here early yesterday morning aboard the Loamy Burton, which found the men floating in a small boat a few hours after the disaster. The Caledonia left Boyne City Sunday evening with 600 bushels of potatoes in the hold and Christmas trees and slabs on the deck. After casting from the tug that pulled them out into the lake, the crew found the boat leaking. With a cold and stiff northwest wind blowing, and attempted to make the harbor again. In this, they were unsuccessful. However, at about 4 o'clock in the morning, the boat began to go down. The crew of 3 cast off in a light yawl, and it was several hours later, when their clothes had become frozen to the bottom of the yawl, the Burton had come alongside to pick them up. The hull of the Caledonia later washed up at Sleeping Bear Point. A little further down the beach is what we call Shipwreck B. Shipwreck B washed up after a big storm in October, November of 2010, I believe. Quite a few people argued about what it was. Some people thought it was part of a fish tug. I went out there with a friend who was pretty well versed in the construction of vessels, and this is an engine bed right here, where the steeple steam engine would be bolted down to. Hand-forged fittings right there tell us it's very old. It fits the boat, the General Taylor. The General Taylor is a Civil War era vessel. Now look at that young guy there. He grabbed a turnbuckle right off there and was walking away from it. Again, this is Super Bowl Sunday. The problem with a easily accessible shore wreck like this is there's artifacts everywhere. So people who don't know just grab them and run off with them. But my friend grabbed them and pulled them back. It's made out of white oak, heavy construction. When I found out this had washed up, I thought to myself, there's got to be more of this ship offshore. So that spring, I went offshore with my boat and side-scan sonar and started looking. And here's some footage of looking off Sleeping Bear Point for shipwrecks. That was a part of a ship, but I thought more of that ship is going to be lying out there. And I did get lucky and find a few things. One of the first things I found, and didn't realize it at the time, was the only recorded shipwreck, or only known about shipwreck offshore, the James McBride. The James McBride was built as a brig and measured 121 feet in length and has a beam of 25 feet. She was launched April Fool's Day, 1848. Late in 1848, the McBride sailed to the Atlantic Ocean to pick up a cargo of salt from Turk Island. On her return, she stopped at Nova Scotia and added codfish to her manifest. She delivered her cargo to Chicago on December 4th, 1848. This trip created a sensation because it's believed to be the first cargo carried direct from the Atlantic to a Lake Michigan port. On mid-October of 1857, the McBride journeyed to the Manitou Islands, where she took on a cargo of wood. On her return